So recently, Kath, we received this incredible opportunity to be a guest on somebody else's podcast, which is pretty exciting.
Yes, it is pretty exciting. And at least both of us, we chuckled because we thought it was pretty exciting until
And
this
then,
email arrived with these incredible questions. And we both had a bit of a freak out going, oh my gosh, these are quite, hectic questions.
they
And,
are.
how are we going to answer them? But actually, we've since discovered that there's been an incredible gift to these questions.
Exactly right. And that brings us to the topic of our conversation today, because one of the questions, which I will add, was pointed to Kathryn in this
Yes, it
list.
was. I
For
take full
everybody
ownership.
yeah, for everybody listening, the questions we received, and we will absolutely share a link to the podcast once we've done the recording. We will point everybody
Yeah.
towards this conversation that we'll have in the very near future. But the questions were pointed to particular, either to Kath or to myself. And we were both chuckling because I was like, oh, I'm glad that question goes to Kath. And Kath's like, oh, I'm glad Ali got that. And then I'm like, oh no, I need to swap with Kath. I don't like that question. But it felt challenging. And here's something interesting right off the bat. It's so funny. We work in this space, Kath, where we're
Yeah.
encouraging other people to consider their thoughts and to get to the bottom of what's really going on. And my instant feeling when I read these lists of questions was like, oh my goodness. Like, I can't do that. That is too hard. And I just instantly, my thoughts went there. But it's interesting when you challenge your thoughts and you reread it and you think about it and change your perspective a little bit. I feel so much more relieved now. But anyway, back to the question for today. You,
Yeah, and
Kath,
it's funny because you just, you sent me a text going, "Oh my gosh, these questions." And I think both of us intuitively, what we did, which I think in itself is such a great takeaway, is I
yeah,
think we both read them through, had a freak out, closed the email, walked away,
walked away.
came back a little while later, reread it, and it's
Yeah,
incredible how remarkably awesome our brains are.
yeah,
Because in that in-between time between, first reading the questions and then walking away, unbeknown to us, our unconscious is sort of unpacking these questions in the background. And so when we both came back and revisited them, of course, they seemed clearer and it seemed okay because our brains had already figured, the answers
some
out
of that out.
to some extent at least. So
Yeah.
yeah,
No,
yeah.
agreed. It's an interesting process, and I love reflecting on that. And I think that's another podcast right there about
Oh,
thought
absolutely.
processes and but anyway, what was
So
interesting
yes, the
that stood
question.
out today, and we thought, hey, this is a great conversation today. It is. I'm just trying to find it again. Um, from people pleasing to authenticity, how did you break free, Kath, of that pattern? And what advice would you give for those struggling with it? And see, this question, people pleasing to authenticity, stands out to me big time because of the space that I work in outside of this podcast.
Yeah,
I see it at play every day. People not
yeah.
knowing who they are, they're not able to be their authentic self because they've been in this place of people pleasing their whole life. And so this is a
Yeah.
great conversation. I'm glad, Stan asked it of you. And here we are today. We're going to unpack this a little bit today.
Yes, and you're spot on there because I think it's certainly, I'm not unique in my story that I
Mm,
discovered as an adult that, just how much of a people pleaser I had been. And I think for many of us, we've grown up in a culture that has asked kind of a lot of us from a sense of wanting us to be a certain way. We're taught from a young age to be a certain way. And I think we've sort of unconsciously, when we be how we feel others want us to be, the response we've received from that is a good response.
yeah.
And when we've kind of tried to break the mold and be different, the response we've got back
Mm.
wasn't always that favorable. And for me, like I recognized, I remember like thinking to myself early on as a quite a young girl, like, oh gosh, how clever am I? I've like hacked the system. I've recognized that if I just, jump when someone says jump and be how they want me to be, then
Yeah.
I just get this amazing return. I get this
Yeah.
praise from people at how wonderful I am because I'm being who they want me to be. And
Mm.
so there was a season in my life where I thought to myself that actually this is a superpower. I
Wow.
just didn't realize at the time how destructive this superpower
Yeah.
could be for my own self.
Mm.
I didn't realize that the longer and I spent in the space of being who others wanted me to be, and I had absolute brilliantly trained feelers out there, and I was constantly on the lookout for cues and clues from other people as to what are they wanting from me, who do they want me to be in the
Mm.
space. And I was, proud of the fact that I could be a bit of a chameleon and change
Mm.
who I needed to be in different circumstances for different people. However, what I absolutely didn't realize at the time was that by being this way, I was kind of
Mm.
moving further and further away from my authentic self
Yeah.
to the point that when it was suddenly, kind of the blinkers came off during coaching training, and
Mm.
I recognized, well, what if this thing that I thought was a superpower actually, has a different side to it? And this different side to it meant that I came face to face with a new reality, and that reality was that I didn't have a clue who I was if I wasn't trying to be something for somebody else.
Wow. I would
Yeah.
imagine, I'm just as you're telling your that part of your story, I can kind of already feel it in myself, that overwhelming feeling of I don't know who I am, and I can imagine that it can be a really scary place to be.
Yeah, I mean, gosh, those early days in and discovering this world of personal development and choosing to confront these things that are, that it's kind of like cracks had started forming in my world in how I was showing up and being in my life,
Mm.
and choosing to actually not ignore these cracks, but confront them and to figure out what to do about them was in that time back then absolutely overwhelming. I remember there were a lot of tears,
Mm.
but at the same time, also a relief in discovering a greater understanding of, of course, people please, because
Mm.
there's so many gifts to that.
Mm.
So even understanding the payoff of that and
Mm.
understanding why I had chosen that pathway and gone
Yeah.
down that pathway. And it didn't mean that I was broken or defunct or,
Mm.
something was wrong, but also the insight that, what, it's okay that this is what I'm discovering
Mm.
because it's never too late to choose something different. And there is a
Mm.
different something to choose. And that other choice is authenticity.
Mm.
So, and I think somebody somewhere along the way had reminded me that it's never too late. At that stage in my life, I was already in my 40s, and I kind of thought, gosh, isn't it too late for all of this? Surely I'm so set in in those, the people pleasing. And it was just so I think I also made a decision at the time to choose to believe that it's not too late
Mm.
and that I was going to figure out what this looked like, because that same person who shared, it's not too late, also helped me to look at this through the lens of, what, you've still got another 40, maybe even more years, like how many years have you got ahead? And so,
Mm.
yes, there's been a lot of years you've already lived, but there's so many years ahead. And so that inspired me to figure out what it could look like to take steps at least towards being more authentic.
Mm. Wow. Takes, yeah, courage. The word that comes to my mind there is courage, because over the years, like The brain's fascinating. We've got that reward part in our brain that wants to, anytime it
Yeah,
feels good, if something feels good, we're going to do it again and again. And that's why it made perfect sense for you to do it again and again. It's why we do anything again and again,
yeah,
because there's that reward and we love it and we're going to keep doing it. And to stop
yeah.
using that reward system in that same way and not sure how you would be perceived and received and what that even look like for you, that takes a lot of courage.
Yeah, look, it did, and it was very, I confess it was very messy in the beginning, and
I
I
bet.
absolutely didn't get it right all the time, and I kept on
Do we
sort of,
ever?
one step towards authenticity and a step backwards towards people pleasing, and
Yeah.
I think what really benefited me, especially in the early days of making the change, was that I was making this change in an environment that was safe because the coaching environment was so safe
Okay.
and we were kind of given permission in our training to be uncomfortable, to
Yeah.
know that this is going to be uncomfortable
Mm.
and to not get it right all the time
Yeah.
and to just test things and to play in the space. And it was sort of hammered into us from the get-go in the coaching training to remove judgment and to rather show up curious,
Yeah.
and even for me, it was a real struggle to not, and I found myself judging myself all the time, but it was the reminder, okay, well, if I just, and because I'm visual, I actually remember practicing putting judgment in a bag and leaving it outside the door, and sort of if I could show up just curious and be curious about what authenticity looks like
Mm.
and recognize that, you know what, I can even play with this and I can kind of um trial a few things to see what worked and what didn't work. And I didn't have to have all the answers right then, was
Yeah.
such a relief in the process. So I think given being given permission to not get it right, to play, to explore, to discover without judgment actually meant that it didn't need to be this scary.
Yeah.
Yes, it still took courage, but it didn't need to be dangerous or scary.
Mm. So did when you think back, did your family kind of notice, who's my wife? Like what was their response to this journey, if there was a response?
Yeah, look, I think one of the sort of triggers for me to actually say, look, I'm willing to start this process. I'm willing to explore all these cracks was that I recognized that life was going to be changing. We were in that stage of life where the empty nest was around the corner, and one of our children was already almost going to be leaving home. So I think the children potentially didn't experience it as much because they were so busy in their own worlds
Yeah.
and going through critical times in their life of who do they want to be when they grow up? And I think I was very intentional about not saying things that would encourage them to people please. I was very intentional about them
Yeah.
discovering their own authentic
Love it.
journeys in that space. So I was really grateful to be learning all these tools and to be recognizing, hang on, if I don't want this for my children, what does that look like? Which helped the journey. And I think, in all honesty, for my husband, it was a big relief actually, because Greg had often recognized the people pleasing in me. And I think at many times it frustrated him to observe and watch me people pleasing. And he would say things like, you're a chameleon and you change and you become completely different people, a person with different people. Like, what is this? What's going on? And he was so encouraging for me to always back myself and be
Yeah.
myself. And
Wow.
I think it was quite challenging for him to watch my struggle in this area.
Yeah.
So when I was sharing with him that, hey, this is what I'm doing, this is what I'm trying, this is, where I'm going, I mean, he couldn't have been more delighted. I think he was so
Oh,
supportive,
yeah.
which also, again, gave me this safe space to practice and to show up. And so I really feel like I was lucky enough to have people around me really championing
Mm.
me on in this change process.
Goodness, that's incredible. And I'm just thinking about the people in my world who I know are struggling in that pattern of people pleasing and struggling to know how to get out of that and how to work out who they are. And I guess if anyone's tuning in today, Kath, where would you say we should start this journey? Like, we're not sure. Where's a good place to start? If people recognize we're stuck in this pattern of pleasing people wherever we go, we just want to keep the peace, we just want to be loved, we want to be accepted. If we're stuck in that pattern, what should we try and do? Well, what's the best place to start?
I love that question. And, I love that what I was learning also in the coaching space, kind of without me even really realizing it, gave me some answers
Mm,
and some places to go to. And without sort of, a lesson on, well, how do you stop people pleasing and how do you be more authentic? Rather, what was proposed and what was encouraged from us is that like sort of going in a different direction and exploring other avenues. So we've got the saying in coaching, what you focus on and what you see will grow. And so we were uh, gifted with these other exercises, like figuring out what your values are, unpacking and understanding your core needs. And without
mm,
me even recognizing it at the time, working out for myself, but what is really important for me, as not just
mm,
for humans in general or those around me, but for me as a human, is a great step in the direction of figuring out who you are, so and the other uh I suppose, concept that was so helpful for me was to recognize that people can change. I believe people change, people grow. That's why you and I work in the space, in the coaching space, because we believe in a growth mindset. We believe that we can all evolve and become, better versions of ourselves. So I think also recognizing that, um, being authentically me wasn't sort of a fixed thing. We develop and grow. So I also started asking myself questions like, who do I want to become?
mm.
And in those, values exercises that we did to try and work out our values, even questions like the funeral question, what would we like others to
Mm.
say to us at our funeral? My brain used to go, but isn't that people pleasing? Isn't that again, like what do other people think of us? It went that way. And I
Yeah.
had this real struggle and between,
Mm.
but what even is people pleasing and being authentically me? But recognizing at the same time that how I would like to be remembered does shine a light on what's important to me and who I want to
Mm.
be. And what if being authentic also has to do with who I want to be and how I want to be
Yeah.
into the world?
Yeah.
And not to different people and not to flip and flop and change and become different things for different people,
Mm.
but as a sort of a grounded but this is who I am,
Yeah.
and that there are certain elements of my world that will shine through no matter where I am and no matter who I'm with, exploring those things.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I love it.
I don't
And
know if I answered your
no,
question.
I can't remember what my question was. So, but
I think
all,
it was along the lines of how do we,
how do we
how do
start?
you make the switch? Yeah,
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 and you absolutely did answer that question because it's not looking back at, oh, I'm a people pleaser, fix being the people pleaser. No, it's okay.
yeah,
How, looking forward, how do I become authentic and what does that look like? And it looks like exploring your values, what actually is important to you. And I just wish we had the language in schools. Like, I feel like maybe we've created this monster of people pleasing in schools when we talk about what are you going to do when you grow up and we analyze, is that a good or a bad, and we have all of these like labels
yeah,
on things when really it's about who do we want to be, how do we want to show up, and then it doesn't matter what we're doing really, it's who we want to be as people. And if we can know who we want to be as a person, everything else starts to fall into place. Not necessarily easily, and
yeah,
there's going to be hardship and all of those things, of course. But when we know how we want to show up in the world, that changes everything.
Yeah.
Um,
And as I'm hearing you speaking, what's coming up for me is just remembering, yes, at school and what are schools about? And the other big thing that school is about, I think, is this connecting with others and living in a community and being part of a community.
mm,
And I mean, who doesn't want to be accepted?
yeah, fit
I
in.
mean, as a kid at school, like you
Of
want to
course.
fit in, you want to be accepted, and we've all been created for community and to be accepted. And I think there's this tension between, okay, so how do I observe my community and gather information that, kind of informs how I need to be to fit in? So there's that on the one side, but then there's also, well, how do I um, do that in a way that is wise and discerning and is not sort of chopping my arm off to completely not be who I am so that I can fit in. But, how do I be like respectful and honoring and the kind of person
Mm,
that is able to connect because that's part of who we are. So how do I authentically connect in a way that is loving and kind and conducive to good community
mm,
without losing who I am in the process because I so badly and desperately want to fit.
yeah. And it is a great tension. All I can see is like a tug of war, trying to
Yeah.
work it all out.
Yeah.
And even as adults, we often find it the same. And I think it's a tension that um, on social media we see play out all of the time as well. And so it's certainly not an easy, yeah, it's not easy at all.
Yeah.
But I love that you raised
And the
in,
other,
I was just going to say,
yeah,
I
no,
love
go for
what
go.
you raised in your answer before. It's about looking forward. And one of my favorite things about coaching is by looking forward and looking at what we do want, what we do hope to see in our life and building our life forward, taking a step, it does do all of the shifts. It happens slowly but surely. We don't have to fix something necessarily. It's about stepping forward.
Yeah. And the other thing I realized on the journey is that, a lot of these topics that are not set in white. And, they're not set in stone and they're not black and white.
Black and white, yeah.
There's sort of gray area as well. And I remember sharing at some point, and I actually think we might have even shared a podcast on this before
Mm,
around, is there even such a thing as healthy people pleasing versus unhealthy people pleasing,
yeah, we
or
did.
what is the difference? And I think we'll actually go and look up the notes. I've got a PDF on that. We'll pop them in pop it in the show notes,
Okay,
I think,
cool.
for this episode if you're interested. But I think the challenge I had was, I kind of in my journey towards trying to be more authentic and less people pleasing, at some stage I said to myself, oh, people pleasing is bad, and I sort of put that in the bad basket and kind of did this pendulum swing, which I very quickly realized was also not the most helpful thing to do. And so I started grappling with these questions of um, when is it appropriate to show up and be in a way that I'm discerning someone else actually needs from me at the moment.
Mm,
And how's that different from people pleasing?
yeah.
So I'm not actually sure if that's really clear or makes sense, but
Yeah, it
sometimes,
does.
yeah. So perhaps let's just, as an example, say that you are wanting something from me. And if I'm being authentically, honestly true to myself, I might want to say, actually, no, Elle, like, sorry, I can't do that. But at the same time, I suppose it's where there's this clash of values. At the same time, I see a need in you and I see that it's empathy or it's
Mm,
some kind of help that's really going to add value, make a difference. And that's one of my values is adding
yeah,
value and making a difference.
yeah.
So it's a case of, well, on the one hand, there is a part of me, and if I'm being honest, I want to say no. But on the other hand, there's also a part of me that's authentically wanting to honor you and,
Yeah,
add value. And so I needed to kind of unpick and recognize that sometimes there is this bit of an overlap. And what if it's not people pleasing? And what if it's rather a sense of serving, honoring, helping, respecting,
Yes.
and recognizing that I had put all those, I bundled all of that into this basket of
Same
people
thing.
pleasing.
Yeah.
And so when I first kind of wanted to chuck it out, it was like, well, am I going to suddenly become this rude, obnoxious, abrupt, like person that, and then I realized, but no, that's not who I want to be.
No.
And so, yeah, it certainly has been an interesting journey forward.
Yeah.
And I don't know that I'll ever get to a point in my life where I'm completely, I think I'll
Mm.
always have this element and touch kind of the people pleaser in me.
Yeah, of
But at the
course.
same time, I kind of think, well, uh, that's okay.
Mm.
And when it comes to big decisions in life, um,
Mm.
there are, and big sort of grounded values. I know what they are. I have much more healthy boundaries
Yeah.
and am definitely more able to back myself and say no in an honoring and respectful way when I want to say no.
I love that. Love that. And I'll just share a real short story about event's going to happen today. So I've got this value of eating in a particular way, healthy eating. There's certain foods that I like to eat, and there's certain foods that I don't love to eat. My husband's been away. He's just flown back in last night, and I know he wants to have a hot date with his wife out for lunch, and he's going to want waffle fries. And now, for me, my value is to eat well. For
Yeah,
him, he wants to connect. And I know he wouldn't mind if I said, no, I won't have a chip and I'm only going to eat whatever else. But I know for him, that's really important to him. He wants to sit and
yeah,
share a bowl of what he's not ready to get rid of the waffle fries, everybody. He wants them, but I'm willing. So I hear what you're saying because it's not people pleasing. I'm not pleasing him by having
yeah,
a waffle fries. I'm acknowledging and respecting that this is a way that we connect in this current season. Is it my hope that maybe one time it won't be over waffle fries? Maybe. But that's okay too. Like it's steps in a different, yeah,
I
just
love
getting
that
tangled with
example.
my
That's,
language.
yeah,
But
no, I
yeah,
love that
it's a simple
example. Yeah,
example. Mm.
yeah. And I think, so if you're listening in and you're tuning in, and if you feel like, you recognize that you have people-pleasing tendencies that have kept you from being who you truly are, and
Yeah.
you don't even have a clue of who you truly are. I think our message today is you're not broken, you're not defunct,
Hmm.
and absolutely there's a way forward to discovering how
Oh,
to
wow.
be more authentically you if you
Mm.
feel like that's what you want to be.
Yes,
And if not, that's okay too.
that's right.
We're not saying it's right or wrong or good or bad. It's just for me, I got to a point in my life where I recognized that carrying on in the same trajectory and on the same
Mm.
path that I was on was just not helpful for myself or my marriage, really.
Yeah.
And so it's that case of making the decision that's right for you in the moment.
Mm.
And if you're wondering where to start or you don't know where to start, yeah, we'd love you to join our membership as a good place to start because we
Yeah.
unpack all sorts of things in there around, living according to our needs and our values and how to unpack values. We've got a free course in our membership that will walk you
Mm.
through all these initial steps
Yeah.
towards discovering more truly who you
Who
are.
you are.
So, yeah,
And here's the thing, there's only one uniquely you in the world, and it would be really great to discover who that is and to share it with the world because I know that the world would be a better place if we can all show up as our authentic self and, be who we've been
yeah.
created to be. So, well, bless you. Thank you for sharing. I think you unpacked that really well, Kath. People pleasing to authenticity. Well done. And I'm so glad you've been on this journey because, I mean, our lives wouldn't have collided as well. So,
Yeah,
very, very
yeah,
excited and pleased. So thank you for having me on your journey as your authentic self, and have a blessed week, everybody tuning in. And we will pop some information into the notes so that you can
for sure.
check out what Kath was mentioning before.
Yeah, and
Oh,
thanks for the opportunity to share this again. It's been a while, so I've enjoyed it.
yeah.
Thanks, Elle.
All right. Have a blessed day.
See you next time. Bye.